Chapter 23. Darkness greeted Holly when she came out of her trance. Confused and disoriented, she stood still, trying to figure out who and where she was. Suddenly her memories flooded back. Headmaster Snape, Voldemort, Sirius, Mrs. Fig, the tree, the plaque. "I made it!" she thought with amazement. Then, Vernon? Holly anxiously cast her thoughts about, searching for the familiar emotions of her brother Vernon. She found nothing. "No," she moaned. "I'm too late. He's dead." Holly sank down to her knees, consumed with despair. "I'm sorry," she sobbed aloud. "So sorry. I tried. I really did." None of it seemed worth it if she couldn't bring Vernon back safely. "What? Huh? Is somebody there?" The voice, rough and scratchy, sounded familiar, and with it, Holly suddenly felt a flood of recognizable emotions. "Vernon, you're alive!" cried out Holly in relief, realizing Vernon must have been asleep when she arrived. "Well, yeah," came the response in a scratchy voice. Vernon was weak, disoriented, and thirsty, but definitely alive. "Holly, is that you?" "Yes, it's me," said Holly with a smile, while wiping off her tears. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here to rescue you," replied Holly. "Oh." Then, "What took you so long?" Holly laughed and wiped off some more tears. "I ran into a few difficulties," she replied. Holly checked her wand and stood up with determination. She had a curse to break. Holly's voice sounded extraordinarily loud to Vernon Wycliffe's ear, but he figured it was because it had been ages since he'd last heard anything. The intense silence had been oppressing. Vernon had tried talking non-stop to combat it, but had given that up when his voice gave way and it hurt too much to talk. "Did you bring any water?" The question, in a stronger voice, came almost without thought. Vernon felt so horribly thirsty. "No, Vernon, sorry," came the regretful reply. "I should have, but there was no chance." "Oh, well," thought Vernon with resignation. It was worth a try. "Where are we?" he asked next. Not that he cared any more. He just wanted to keep Holly talking. It was reassuring to hear her voice, to think he was no longer alone in this room. I don't really know," replied Holly in a thoughtful voice. "We're sort of between things." Oh. That didn't explain much of anything, not that it mattered. But Holly had stopped talking, so Vernon tried another question. "How did you get here?" Talking seemed to improve the sound of his voice, and it didn't hurt nearly as much to talk as before. There was a pause in which Vernon heard the shuffle of Holly's feet moving nearer before she answered. "I expect pretty much the same way you did," she said finally, sounding much closer than before. "I touched a plaque." "Remember that thing you found in the tree, the one with Cousin Harry's name on it?" she began. "You touched it, remember?" Vernon struggled to remember. That moment seemed so very long ago. "Well, that's what brought you here. And I'm so sorry," Holly added in a rush. "This is all my fault. I should have told you about that. Should have warned you. Then you would have known to keep away." Vernon barely remembered that bit of silver in the tree, and didn't see how touching it had brought him here, but didn't argue. Holly seemed so sincere, so full of remorse. "That's okay," he said, letting her off the hook. After all, she was rescuing him. "I was bored," he added. "I probably would have touched it anyway." That was true enough. Vernon didn't know why he touched it, but he knew he couldn't have stopped from touching it once he saw his reflection in its mirror-like surface. "How do we get out?" asked Vernon. Holly was close enough now he could hear her breathing, but she had stopped for some reason. "I'm working on it," she replied. Her voice indicated she was standing near his right side. "Darn," she muttered. "It looks like I'm going to have to touch it to get it to start." "Touch what?" "The chair," said Holly, as if that answered everything. Vernon could hear more noises like scrapings on the ground. "Careful," he told her. This chair is crazy, he added, remembering those straps that clutched him like tentacles and dragged him into the chair, binding him there before he even knew what was going on. I know, said Holly calmly. I think I'm going to have to make it go crazy to get things going again. Sorry. That's okay. Get what going again? Vernon had no idea what Holly was talking about, but he assumed whatever it was meant getting him out of there, which was fine with him. You ready? She asked. I guess. Vernon heard a soft tapping sound from behind him. Nothing happened. He heard it again, louder this time, like someone knocking on the back of the chair. Still, nothing happened. Drat, muttered Holly. What's supposed to happen? Asked Vernon curiously. Suddenly, he felt the chair shake sharply, and immediately the chair swung rapidly around, stopping with a lurch in the opposite direction. Then Vernon heard the sounds of a struggle of some sort, and guessed those tentacle-like straps had reached out to catch Holly. The struggling sounds stopped. Abruptly, the chair swung around again and became quiet. That, answered Holly dryly, from somewhere behind Vernon. Oh. What next? He wondered aloud. Next, we wait, she said as the lights came on. The lights blinded Vernon. He was so used to the darkness. Vernon squeezed his eyes shut, and when he finally opened them again, he could see Holly standing near, but off to one side. She wore a dirty, dark sweatshirt he didn't recognize. Hi, said Holly with a smile. How are you doing? I've been better, replied Vernon with a weak smile. It was good to be able to see again, even if it was this horrible square room with its stone floor and walls. Well, it won't be long now, and then we'll be able to get out of here, said Holly reassuringly. That's good, replied Vernon. I'm kind of tired of sitting in this chair. Holly smiled again, and then turned her attention to something in front of him. Vernon looked too, and saw that huge mirror and the black-haired person standing in front of it. Hey, said Vernon with surprise. It's happening again, he added, as the person fixed his black eyes directly on Vernon and said in a high, cold voice, Hello, Harry Potter. Surprised to see me? I know, said Holly calmly. That's the idea. Huh? Asked Vernon. He glanced at Holly, but she didn't explain further, only looked steadily at the person with the black eyes, so Vernon did too. He hadn't paid the figure much attention the first time. Once Vernon figured out it was a projection of some sort and not a real person, Vernon devoted his time to trying to get out, shouting and yelling to see if anyone else was around to help. But there hadn't been anyone. Who is he? Vernon asked curiously while studying the person. A handsome youth who looked not much older than himself. At the moment, he was boasting about how he got somebody named Ginny to help. His name is Tom Riddle, answered Holly, her eyes still fixed on the person. The person, Tom Riddle, was now talking about green eyes, a trophy room, and detention. Why's he got it in for Cousin Harry? All this had been obviously intended for Cousin Harry. Holly looked over at Vernon. I honestly don't know, she replied thoughtfully. I should try and ask Cousin Harry sometime, but I don't know if he'd answer. He's pretty private. Oh. He reminds me a lot of Montague, said Vernon, studying Tom Riddle's arrogant stance and icy face that radiated hatred as he explained that they would go back in time for a rematch. Then this Montague is a very dangerous person indeed, said Holly firmly. Yes, agreed Vernon, remembering Montague's relentless voice in the gym when he insisted Vernon talk about anything and everything or risk being crushed by exercise weights. And I don't think he likes purple either, Vernon added. Oh, Vernon, cried Holly with real anguish, understanding his reference immediately. I'm so sorry. If I had known someone like Tom Riddle would get that letter, I would have never sent it. She meant the letter she had mailed Vernon last year, which Montague intercepted. The letter dripped purple ink when opened by anyone other than Vernon. It's okay, replied Vernon. Cousin Harry fixed things. Montague had looked immensely happier with clean hands the next day, but Vernon had kept his distance, just in case. I'm glad, said Holly, sounding relieved, because Tom Riddle is seriously evil, and if this Montague is anything like him, then... Yeah, I know, replied Vernon. I've been avoiding Montague as much as possible, he told her. That was easier said than done, as the professors had handed Montague additional supervisorial responsibilities, giving him lots of power over the other students. So far, however, nothing else serious had happened between the two of them. The movie was okay, commented Vernon as the figure of Tom Riddle pointed to the surface of the huge standing mirror, which then began to swirl with different colors. Vernon had stopped momentarily trying to call for help and rested while he watched it. He and Holly were both quiet as Tom Riddle gave a spine-chilling laugh at the thought of Vernon, Harry, somehow watching his own death. Tom Riddle then coldly bid goodbye, signifying the end of, as he put it, the famous Harry Potter, before dissolving into mist and vanishing. Kind of short, though, Vernon reflected, referring to the length of the movie to come, while shivering mentally. The Riddle guy had been serious about making whoever sat in the chair, Harry or not, starve to death, and would no doubt have succeeded had Holly not somehow arrived. Tom Riddle was one scary dude. Vernon pushed the unnerving thoughts of Tom Riddle aside and concentrated on the movie in front of him instead. And bad filming, he added, when Vernon again saw that overview of a large cavern looking down over the head of a huge stone statue. It could have used some close-ups, Vernon continued, when he viewed the three people dressed in black at the base of the statue. They're too small to see very well. The girl with the bright red hair lay still on the ground. A small boy wearing glasses was bending over her, and the third person, who looked like this Tom Riddle guy, leaned on a pillar. I wonder what they're supposed to be saying, mused Vernon. Sound would have been useful also. And the acting, it's not a movie, interrupted Holly flatly, and they're not acting. Huh? Vernon looked at Holly in surprise. She was watching the mirror intently. But what else could it be, he questioned, especially when it repeats like this. That's Cousin Harry, said Holly, ignoring Vernon's question and pointing at the boy in black robes wearing the glasses, when he was 12 years old. Vernon looked closely at the boy. It did sort of look like a younger version of Cousin Harry, but still. So, who took the video, he asked. Even if it was Cousin Harry, it still had to be a recording of some sort. I said it wasn't a movie, restated Holly firmly, and it's not a recording. That's Cousin Harry, and he's 12, she repeated. The girl is Ginny Weasley. You've met her at the station, Holly continued. She's Cousin Harry's wife now. And Vernon vaguely remembered the red-haired lady he had scarcely said hello to before Dad had whisked the family out of the station after the holidays. You're looking into the past, insisted Holly. So you're saying this rewinding stuff he was talking about was for real? Yes, replied Holly. And that's a phoenix, she added, when the red bird flew out, dropping a ragged old hat at the boy's feet, and then landed on his shoulder. Phoenixes don't exist, stated Vernon automatically, while he watched the images in the mirror. They do for wizards, countered Holly. And that's a basilisk chasing after him. You'll turn into stone if you look into a basilisk's eyes. But that can't be right, protested Vernon, while he watched the boy run with arms outstretched from the huge snake, the basilisk, as Holly called it. Because in this film, I'm telling you, it's not a film. Well, whatever it is, conceded Vernon, it's not real, because the boy you claim is Cousin Harry dies in it, and I know, replied Holly. But he's not dead, protested Vernon. That's what we have to fix, replied Holly patiently. Fix? Yes, we have to fix it so Cousin Harry lives before we can get out of this room. Oh, replied Vernon. Then he asked, how? With that, said Holly, indicating the silver sword that had just appeared. Vernon remembered the sword from last time. It lay with its glittering red rubied handle tantalizingly just out of reach. He wasn't sure whether it was real or not, but Vernon had tried hard with his feet to get the sword nearer in the hopes of using it somehow to cut his straps. All he succeeded in doing was making the straps tighten even more around his legs. Vernon didn't see how a sword here could help anyone somewhere else, let alone someone in a mirror. He watched curiously as Holly used both hands to grasp the handle and lift the sword. Surely she'd use it to break his straps, but instead she pointed it towards the mirror. "What do you intend to do with it?" he asked. Holly stood with the sword in front of the mirror, blocking Vernon's view. But he didn't have to see to know what was happening. He'd seen it before. The boy, Cousin Harry as Holly insisted, tripped and fell. Then the red bird attacked the snake, and the boy put on that dumb-looking hat just before the snake reached down and grabbed him in its jaws. The snake gave a shake and crunched down. Then everything went black. It was a pretty lame ending. The scene did make more sense if it was supposed to be Cousin Harry down here and Cousin Harry in the chair, as Tom Riddle intended, except that was impossible. You couldn't be in two places at once, could you? Suddenly, Holly leaned forward into the mirror with the sword pointing forward. Instead of breaking or toppling the mirror, the sword seemed to go right into it. "That's a pretty neat trick," said Vernon admiringly, as Holly stepped back away from the mirror without the sword. "Watch," said Holly, standing to one side, giving Vernon a clear view. The boy that was supposed to be Cousin Harry was still on the ground with that dumb hat on his head. Vernon watched in amazement as Cousin Harry grabbed a sword from out of the hat, a silver sword with a glittering red color at the handle. The snake lunged at Cousin Harry. Still gripping the sword, he dodged, and the snake hit the chamber wall. The snake opened its mouth wide and lunged at Cousin Harry again. He brought the sword up into the roof of the snake's mouth. The snake keeled over sideways and fell, twitching, to the floor. The room went black. "Everything's okay," assured Holly calmly, her voice sounding loud and clear in the darkness. Vernon realized she must have felt his sudden panic at the darkness. "How did you like that ending?" she asked. "Much better," agreed Vernon, forcing himself to focus on her words, not the darkness that threatened to swallow him. "That's the way it's supposed to have been," informed Holly. "But I don't understand," Vernon began. "If that's really Cousin Harry when he was 12, then that means we're looking into the past somehow, and that's just not possible." "Tom Riddle was a clever, really powerful wizard," replied Holly. "I don't know how he did it, but he did. He made time go backwards somehow." Suddenly, the lights came on. Vernon breathed a major sigh of relief. "Look," Holly commanded, directing his attention again to the mirror. The mirror's polished surface had already begun to swirl with color. The color solidified into a new scene. This scene showed someplace outside in the open air. Everything looked almost gray. It could be dusk or dawn. Vernon could barely make out a big stone building and a huge door of some sort. "It's morning," said Holly softly, "and that's my school, Hogwarts." "Really?" thought Vernon, and he stared at the castle and grounds with much more interest. "There was a big battle at Hogwarts 21 years ago," added Holly in an instructional voice. And indeed, Vernon could see the signs of battle. The walls of the castle and door looked heavily battered, and there were black scorch marks everywhere, and several sections of the wall appeared deeply pitted. "That's Lord Voldemort and his forces coming to the castle," continued Holly, pointing out the row of tiny lights moving towards the castle. The lights suddenly winked out, and Vernon saw some figures step out of the woods onto the cleared grounds while still heading towards the castle. "Lord Voldemort's the guy in front with the snake," continued Holly, while pointing to one of the figures. "Voldemort?" said Vernon in surprise. He recognized the name. Holly had mentioned it to him during the holidays when she was explaining why Dad had changed his name from Dursley to Wycliffe. Vernon peered closely at the person with white skin. The huge snake wrapped around its body made the guy difficult to see. "Why him?" he asked. "I thought this was all Tom Riddle's bit." "Tom Riddle changed his name when he got older," said Holly solemnly, "to Lord Voldemort." "Oh," said Vernon with new understanding. At least there was only one crazy wizard out there instead of two, though this guy didn't look the least bit like the handsome boy who called himself Tom Riddle. "The big man behind Lord Voldemort is Hagrid," Holly continued conversationally. "He's one of the professors at Hogwarts. He's carrying Cousin Harry." Cousin Harry looks bigger, observed Vernon as he saw the person in Hagrid's arms. Yes, agreed Holly. This is, she thought a bit, 5 years after the thing with the basilisk. And dead, added Vernon bluntly, as Hagrid set the limp body down on the ground in front of all the people that had streamed out from behind the big doors. Cousin Harry was playing dead for some reason, said Holly calmly. How come he didn't know? Asked Vernon. Huh? I mean, if Lord Voldemort was such a great wizard, explained Vernon, how come he didn't know Cousin Harry was still alive? Good question, answered Holly thoughtfully. He should have known, but he didn't for some reason. I don't know why, but Professor Lovegood said it must have been terribly embarrassing for Lord Voldemort to learn otherwise. Knowing what I know now, I think she's right. Look, Holly added eagerly, when a young man from the crowd came forward to face Lord Voldemort. That person is Professor Longbottom. He teaches herbology. There's that dumb hat again, said Vernon, as he saw a pointed hat floating in the air. It's called a sorting hat, said Holly absently, as the hat landed on Professor Longbottom's head. But Holly wasn't watching the mirror anymore. She had bent down and was lifting up a sword. When'd that get here? Asked Vernon with surprise. He recognized the sword as the same one that had been in the room earlier. And how? He added mentally. Holly didn't answer. Instead, she was pushing the sword directly into the mirror, right over the image of Professor Longbottom, where a fire had begun. The sword seemed to slide into the mirror as if it was butter. Check this out, Holly told Vernon, stepping back so he could watch clearly. So Vernon watched. Professor Longbottom seemed frozen in place. All of a sudden he pulled the sword out of the hat and with a single strike sliced off the head of the snake. Whoa, said Vernon, impressed. The snake's head flew tumbling through the air, coming closer and closer, and a smelly cloth suddenly landed on Vernon's face, covering his eyes, blocking his vision. What? Sorry, he heard Holly say. Scarcely had Holly finished speaking when Vernon heard a loud, thunderous crack, followed by the sound of breaking glass. Suddenly the straps across his chest constricted, forcing the breath out of him. Vernon felt and heard several cracks in his front and sides as the straps continued to squeeze even tighter. At the same time, he felt pelted by numerous small, hard objects with sharp ends. Then everything went quiet. Lumos, came Holly's voice clearly from somewhere next to him. Just hang on, she told Vernon confidently. I'll have you out soon. Vernon didn't respond. He was having a hard time breathing. The straps had tightened so much he could scarcely take a breath. Vernon never imagined the pain of sitting in that chair could be worse than it had been, but it was. The smelly cloth was removed. Vernon opened his eyes and saw a soft yellow light shining over him. He recognized the concerned face of Holly bending over him. She held a lit stick up high, like a torch. Where had that come from? Vernon wondered vaguely, while Holly's other hand was briskly shaking out the cloth, the blue sweatshirt he had seen her wear earlier. Between his loud wheezes, Vernon heard the tinkle of broken glass landing on the ground. Holly was now wearing a light-colored t-shirt with a sparkly black line drawing and glittering green eyes. Vernon recognized it as the shirt he had given Holly for her birthday, the one he last remembered seeing her wearing. He could see the dark splinters of wood sticking out of her hair. Even with the light, it was hard to see. Dust filled the air, making everything seem hazy. It was so hard to breathe, and when Vernon did manage to get some air, the dust made him cough. Don't bother trying to talk, Holly told him as she used the sweatshirt to brush away the broken bits of glass from the rest of Vernon's body. I know it hurts. I'll have the straps off in a minute. When she had finished brushing him off, Holly set the sweatshirt down on the floor, straightened, and transferred the lit stick to her other hand. Was that her wand? Vernon guessed it must be, though he had never seen it before, and had certainly never seen her use it. Why hadn't she used the wand when she first arrived? I'm afraid I'm going to have to turn out the light, Holly told him, but only for a few seconds, while I get these straps cut. The light winked out. Defendo, Holly shouted immediately. There was a loud crack and a flash of light before all was dark again. Lumos, Holly said next. The soft yellow light returned. Vernon saw the light up at Holly's head. The wand appeared tucked behind her ear, and Holly used both hands to swiftly remove the straps that held Vernon's chest to the chair. Suddenly, Vernon could breathe freely again. The dust had settled a bit, but when he tried to draw in a deep breath, he could feel a sharp pain stabbing into his chest. "Ow," he said immediately, wincing in pain. Beyond Holly, Vernon could see a pile of rubble, the remains of the huge mirror. Vernon tried to talk. He wheezed some more and then started to cough. "Take short breaths," advised Holly. "It'll hurt less that way." "You," gasped. "You knew," sputtered Vernon, accusingly between breaths. "You knew it would break," he tried again. Holly started using both hands to unwind a strap and release his arm. "How did you know?" Vernon asked quickly, before his body went uncontrollably into another series of coughs. Vernon's arm dropped limply to his side before Holly answered. "I've been here before," she said in a low voice, not looking directly at him. "How?" argued Vernon, when his coughing stopped. "You've never been to Dad's old place before." But even as he spoke, Vernon knew somehow Holly was telling the truth. All the signs were there, he just hadn't been paying attention. Holly might have heard Cousin Harry had killed that snake, but the rest of it? She hadn't been surprised by anything. She knew about the crazy chair, that something needed fixing, the exploding mirror, and what to do with the sword. She had expected all of it. "There's a plaque like the one you touched in the trophy room at Hogwarts," replied Holly, as she started unwinding the straps binding Vernon's other arm. "Or there was," she amended. "Albus touched the plaque, and it was he sitting in that chair instead of you," Holly continued quietly. "Who?" questioned Vernon, as his other arm fell limply into his lap. "Albus," replied Holly, removing the wand from her ear. "He has green eyes, too, and he's Cousin Harry's son." "Oh," said Vernon, not knowing what else to say. How could the same room be gotten into from two different places, especially a room with no visible doors or windows? "This is the reason why Dad didn't want me to return to Hogwarts after my first year," added Holly. "Why don't you work on wiggling your fingers to improve circulation while I get your legs free?" she suggested, while pointing her light at the straps around his legs. "Okay," replied Vernon, staring at his non-moving fingers before the light again went out. "Defendo!" Holly shouted. There was a familiar crack and a flash of light. "Lumos," she said next, and the soft yellow light returned again, glowing behind Holly's ear. Then Holly began to remove the straps from around his legs. "There," said Holly with satisfaction when the last of the straps had been removed. "Now we can get out of here." "Come on," she encouraged Vernon, lifting one of his arms and placing it over her shoulder. "We haven't much time." Holly," began Vernon hesitantly. "Yes," replied Holly, while tugging Vernon out of the chair. "I don't think I can move." "What?" questioned Holly, immediately stopping what she was doing. "But of course you can," she protested. "You're not hurting. Come on, you can do it," she encouraged. "Just try." And Holly resumed her efforts to get Vernon out of the chair. Vernon didn't argue and tried his best to help, but he was far heavier than Holly, and when she succeeded on getting him balanced on her shoulders and tried to move off, Vernon's legs collapsed, and the two fell to the floor. "Vernon," said Holly in a shocked voice. "Told you," he muttered. "But you don't." Holly stopped. She placed a finger firmly on one of Vernon's legs and pushed down hard. Vernon could see her do it, but he couldn't feel it. Holly looked up at Vernon questioningly. "You can't feel a thing, can you?" she asked softly. Vernon nodded shamefacedly. "Haven't been able to for some time now," he confessed. "What happened?" "I kept on struggling," he began, "trying to get out, trying to get free. And the straps, they just kept on tightening and tightening until I couldn't move any more. It hurt for a while," Vernon added reflectively. "Then it got numb. And then I couldn't feel anything at all." "Why didn't you say something?" "Didn't matter before," replied Vernon philosophically while he watched Holly rub one of his legs. "I figured I was doomed to die in that chair, and at least it wouldn't hurt as much in the end. I never thought anyone would arrive to rescue me," he added. What are you doing? He asked as Holly removed one of his shoes and started rubbing his foot and wiggling the toes beneath his sock. Trying to increase your circulation, answered Holly as she worked. You've got to be able to move your feet, said Holly with concern. I can't carry you on my own, and we've got to get to the wall. Oh. Come on, Holly muttered anxiously as she wiggled Vernon's ankle and toes. Why the hurry? Asked Vernon as he tried to wiggle his toes too. They stubbornly refused to do anything. Because Tom Riddle's curse was the only thing holding this place together, explained Holly, now rubbing his other leg. Without his curse, this room is going to fall apart. And if we're in it when it happens. She removed his other shoe and started working on his foot and toes. I get the picture, said Vernon grimly. How long do we have? He asked as he concentrated on moving his legs, arms, fingers, anything. He could feel a bit of a tingle, but that wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. I don't know, replied Holly as she again massaged his legs. Last time, I got hit by part of the mirror when it exploded and was knocked unconscious. The blocks in the ceiling were falling by the time I woke up. Great, muttered Vernon, and he renewed his efforts on movement. Hey, he said eagerly, as he saw, rather than felt, his toes jerk a bit under his direction. I think it's working. That's the way, said Holly approvingly. Now, let's get some more movement, she said, as she vigorously renewed her own massaging efforts. Slowly, sensation began to return throughout Vernon's body. The numbness diminished, and the steady tingle increased until... It hurts, Vernon suddenly said. And indeed, much like sensations returning to frost-bitten hands, with the increased circulation came increased pain. Pain everywhere, building and building. Make it stop, Vernon cried in agony. I don't know how, replied Holly. She kept on rubbing his legs as if that would help. But the pain didn't stop. It kept on increasing and increasing until Vernon could think of nothing else. The pain felt like 1,000 needles piercing his body over and over again at once, a never-ending fire that was everywhere and unstoppable. Vernon found himself screaming uncontrollably. His mind kept on screaming long after his voice gave out, and still the pain continued. At some point, Vernon found himself again in control of his senses. He still hurt, but the pain had receded to more tolerable levels. He realized he was lying on a cold, rough floor. Not only that, but he could feel the floor beneath him. Holly was cradling him in her arms, crooning softly, "It'll be okay," over and over again. She stopped when he raised his head and looked about. "Feeling better?" she asked gently. "Yeah," he croaked. His throat felt awful. Holly's lit wand was sticking out off to one side, stuck in a crack between the stones, and Vernon could just barely see her features in its soft light. A loud crash sounded from nearby. Vernon looked over at the sound. He saw a cloud of dust rise in one corner of the room, adding to the dust already in the air. "Think you can move?" Holly asked. Vernon nodded, coughing because of the dust. His arms and legs did seem to be functioning more on command. "Good," she replied, "because I think we'd better get out of here, now." And another huge block came crashing down, making the whole room shudder and filling the air with dust. Holly again draped Vernon's arm over her shoulder. With her free hand, she reached out and grabbed her wand, holding it like a torch out in front of her. Then she staggered to a stand. This time, Vernon was able to move his legs under him and bear most of his weight. Together the two stumbled forward to one of the walls, threading their way between several huge stone blocks that had already fallen. When they reached the wall, Holly stopped. "It won't be long now," she said confidently. Holly pointed her wand resolutely at the wall. The light winked out. Holly shouted, "Bombarda Maxima!" There was a flash of light, accompanied by the sound of a loud explosion. The whole room shuddered, and more blocks came out of the ceiling, landing with a loud crash. The dust sent Vernon into a spasm of coughing that hurt all the worse because of the stabbing pains in his chest. It took several minutes before he could stop. "Darn," muttered Holly in the darkness. "Bombarda Maxima!" she shouted again. Again there was a loud blast of sound and a flash of light. The room shuddered, and blocks landed disturbingly near. Vernon covered his mouth with his free arm, avoiding the dust clouds that had caused him to cough before. "Is that what's supposed to happen?" asked Vernon curiously from beneath his arm. He didn't like the way more blocks kept on falling around them. "No," replied Holly worriedly. "It's supposed to break through the wall so we can get out." "Oh." "Bombarda Maxima!" Holly shouted a third time. Again the room shuddered, and blocks landed. "Maybe it's the wrong wall." "No, it's the right wall," replied Holly with conviction. "Lumos," she added, and the wand lit up, illuminating all the recent damage in the room. Huge stone blocks practically covered the floor. Others piled on top of the fallen ones. One stone block had landed directly on the chair, crushing it completely. The wall in front of them looked totally undamaged. "It's the wall nearest the way we came in," Holly explained. "No, it isn't," argued Vernon, looking around. "I fell into the chair from the front. So I must have come in from that way," he said, lifting his free arm to point. "I can't figure out how I missed the mirror when I was feeling around in the beginning," he mused. "You fell into the chair from the front?" asked Holly wonderingly. "But that means—" "Of course," she said excitedly. "The trophy room entrance isn't there anymore. We destroyed it." "You're right," Holly told Vernon, as she hastily turned around, pulling Vernon with her. "This is the wrong wall. From the front, you say?" she asked, urging Vernon to move forward. "Yeah," confirmed Vernon. "We've got to hurry," Holly told Vernon. "We haven't much time."